Flip-hand phones, Babylons can't crack the code.
What do YouTube? B. Kelly back again with another banger video. In today's video, y'all, I am going to be talking about 5 college football players that will break out in 2021. Now, this is part 2 of this series, and I will drop part 1 in the description down below. But before we move on with the video, remember to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, as we are on the road to 10K. Now let's get into it. First, I am going to be talking about Bijan Robinson, running back from Texas. Now, he had a stellar 2020 campaign as a true freshman, where in 9 games played, he had 86 attempts for 703 yards, averaging a very impressive 8 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns on the ground, 196 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. He even capped off his season in an amazing way. In the 2020 Alamo Bowl, he was the MVP with 10 rushes for 183 yards and 1 touchdown in a 55-23 victory versus Colorado. Last season, Bijan was a main running back for Texas, but he still had to split carries with people such as Sam Ehlinger, who could run the ball. Kshawn Johnson had 80 carries in that season, and Keontae Ingram had 53 carries in 6 games. In the newly hired head coach in Steve Sarkisian from Alabama, you can expect Bijan Robinson and his workload as a running back to skyrocket, especially with Keontae Ingram transferring to USC. Now, Steve Sarkisian has been known for having some very good offenses, and you can definitely expect Bijan to be the face of the Texas Longhorns as a team and as an offense. The guy is already seen as a top back going into this season, and now that he has an offensive-minded coach, that you've seen what he did with Najee Harris, imagine what he's going to do now with a player of Bijan Robinson's caliber that is also a former 5-star recruit and top running back from his recruiting class, just like Najee. Now, Bijan Robinson in this upcoming season, I'm expecting him to be a top back, and he could even potentially be a Heisman dark horse for the 2021 campaign. Next up, I have wide receiver from LSU, Kshawn Boote. Now in the 2020 season as a true freshman as well, he had a good season where in 10 games played, he had 45 receptions for 735 yards, averaging 16 yards per reception and a total of 5 touchdowns through the air. When the news dropped that Jamar Chase was opting out of the 2020 season right before it was starting, there was a lot of speculation of who was going to be that next guy for LSU that was going to show up, since everybody already knew who Terrace Marshall Jr. was, but they needed to know who else was going to show up, and that guy was Kshawn Boote. And especially after Marshall Jr. opted out near the end of the 2020 season, he became the #1 option, and he absolutely feasted. His breakout game in 2020 was versus Ole Miss, where he had 14 receptions for 308 yards and 3 total touchdowns. Going into 2021 for LSU, Kshawn Boote is listed as wide receiver 1, and rightfully so. The guy balled out as wide receiver 1 last year, and he was balling out in every role that he had during 2020. And if you keep up with some of the previous wide receiver 1s at LSU, they've all been feasting, and I'm expecting Kshawn to be one of the top receivers in this upcoming season, and definitely expect to hear his name a lot as the season goes on. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if he was a Biletnikoff finalist or semifinalist by the time the season is ending, because honestly, he is that good. The guy is an amazing receiver, and I'm expecting some very big things from him in 2021 if he does not get hurt, because everyone has a chance to get hurt, and if he can stay healthy and do all that he's been doing so far, definitely going to expect him to be a top wide receiver. On to the next player that I'm going to be talking about is defensive back from North Carolina, Tony Grimes. Now, in his 2020 campaign as a true freshman, he played in 8 games, had 14 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 interception, and a total of 3 pass deflections. But a stat that I think is worth mentioning about Tony Grimes from 2020 is that he only allowed 8 catches on 20 targets for 89 yards. Not only that, he only had 1 reception on him that was 15 plus yards. And something else that we cannot forget is that Tony Grimes was actually supposed to be playing high school football in 2020 instead of college football for North Carolina. He reclassified right before the season started, literally right before it, because he might not have a high school season and he wanted to get there ASAP and start getting some playing time with North Carolina. With everything that I just brought up about Tony Grimes, all you can be is very excited to see what he can do in 2021. Not to mention him and Storm Duck being the 2 main cornerbacks in your secondary is going to be very, very fun to watch, as both guys are very talented defensive backs. Right now, North Carolina is having their best shot and best chance they've had in a while to win the ACC, as many people do think they can compete with Clemson and potentially even get a playoff spot this season. And Tony Grimes is going to be a very influential part of their team and their success in 2021. Next up, I have wide receiver from Maryland, Rakim Jarrett. Now, he had a very interesting recruiting process, as this guy was thought to be an LSU lock pretty much all the way up to signing day, until he shocked many people by choosing Maryland and staying home. In his 2020 campaign as a true freshman, he only played in 4 games, as Maryland did not play in a lot of games because the Big Ten started very late and every team did not play in very many games in the Big Ten. But he still had a pretty solid season, as he had 17 receptions for 252 yards, averaging 15 yards per reception and 2 total touchdowns through the air. On the team, he ranked 2nd in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. His biggest game of the season came versus Penn State, where he had 5 receptions for 144 yards and a couple touchdowns. With a full offseason heading into 2021 and his quarterback, Tagovailoa, having that same full offseason and having a starting season under his belt, plus the factor of them actually being able to play in more games as a team in 2021 versus 2020, I'm expecting his numbers to skyrocket from this past season to now. The final guy I'm going to be talking about in today's video is quarterback from Clemson, DJ Ulay. In the 2020 season, as a freshman quarterback, he was the backup to starting quarterback Trevor Lawrence, who went on to be the number 1 pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. He would have to play in major playing time in 2 games versus Boston College and Notre Dame, in which he beat Boston College but lost to Notre Dame, but ultimately played very well in both games. He would play in 9 games in 2020, where he played very well when he was playing, as he completed 67% of his passes, threw for 914 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Not to mention, he also rushed for 4 touchdowns on the ground. He is the starter heading into 2021, and he is expected to be one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football this season, and potentially someone that might even win the Heisman Trophy. He was showing a lot of promise in the 2 games he played a lot in versus Boston College and Notre Dame. That makes people think he is going to be a top quarterback in this league right off the bat. And to be honest, I think he's going to be a top quarterback this season as well. And I think he's going to put up some monster numbers in his first year as the starting quarterback at Clemson. Well, guys, if you guys have made it this far in the video, leave your thoughts down below of who I missed and if I should make a part 3 of this video. I know I didn't include some players such as Bryce Young and Justin Flo and many others, but leave down your thoughts below if you want to see this series continued. And before you head out, remember to smash that like button, turn on them post notifications, and subscribe for more videos. B. Kelly, out.